There's a ton of antitrust lawsuits and regulations happening around the world right now, and the Digital Markets Act in the EU is one of the most important to know. It was first passed in 2022, but it didn't start getting enforced until March of 2024. That was the deadline for 6 gatekeepers to start following the DMA's rule, and Apple and Google were among this crew. Before we get into what Apple and Google did to comply with this groundbreaking legislation, let's talk about what the DMA actually says. It basically sets out do's and don'ts for the major platforms or gatekeepers like Apple, Google, Meta, and Amazon. Among the do's is a big one for game devs. Gatekeepers need to allow developers to sell directly to consumers off-platform and be able to communicate those off-platform channels. Basically, they need to put an end to their anti-steering rules and allow direct-to-consumer services like sideloading and alternative payments. The don'ts have to do with safeguarding consumer data and avoiding anti-competitive behavior, like self-preference. A lot of people in the industry didn't think Apple's policy changes were enough to comply with the DMA. The EU Commission are the ones who get to decide if Apple's policy changes are enough for compliance. Otherwise, they can hand Apple some hefty fines. For now, these changes to the App Store are a sign that Apple is opening up its ecosystem, and developers can start taking advantage of some D2C and alternative payment benefits. For example, we've seen games like Angry Birds link out from the game to a survey that leads to their web shop. Train Station 2 link to a reward page from their game, then to their web shop. And Monopoly Go lead players to their loyalty program. Now let's turn to Google. In anticipation of the DMA rollout, Google rolled out their own set of Play Store updates just 2 days before enforcement began in March. Among the changes, they announced an update to their billing system. Called Developer Choice Billing, it gave devs the option to exclusively use an alternative payment provider for a 3% lower fee, so 27% commission instead of 30% under the standard billing. Another update was the rollout to the External Offers program. Under this program, developers could promote direct-to-consumer channels and use external links from the app, similar to Apple's alternative terms, but at a fee. An initial acquisition fee of 10% for the first 2 years or 5% for auto-renewing subscriptions, and an ongoing service fee of 17% or 7% for auto-renewing subscriptions. So in total, devs are paying up to 27% under the External Offers program for the ability to use external links and promote alternative payment options. Of course, that doesn't include the fees that the alternative payment platform would take. Like the response to Apple, the industry wasn't so hot on Google's updates either. So once again, it's up to the EU Commission to decide whether Google's compliance and measures are enough to avoid a large fine. As we've seen, the DMA has already made a big impact in the gaming industry. Epic Games, for example, launched their Epic Games Store on iOS in the EU and returned Fortnite to these users thanks to the DMA's provisions around sideloading. And other antitrust regulations in the world, from Apple v. Epic in the US to the UK's Digital Markets, Competition and Consumers Act, seem to be leading the way for opening up the ecosystem even more. Will you be among them? If you want to learn more about going D2C in Europe while staying compliant with the DMA, reach out to us at Stash.